Hello, I'm Wayne Heili. I am the Managing Director and CEO of Peninsula Energy. I've been a part of the U.S. uranium industry since the late 1980s, and today I'm helping Peninsula Energy in their endeavor to restart the Lance project's production facility in the state of Wyoming as we move from an alkaline in situ recovery process to a low pH in situ recovery process, which we believe will greatly enhance the productivity of the mine site at Lance. We're expecting production to be back online mid-2023. So it's a very exciting time for Peninsula Energy, and it's great to join you today, Matt.
Hi, I'm Bruce Lane from GTi Energy. We also are in Wyoming. We have exploration stage projects. The most recent project that we've acquired is our Lohuma project in the Powder River Basin. And we've acquired a drilling database there, which we think has a replacement value of around $15 million and would take us 3 years to execute. And off the back of that, we're hoping to put out a resource by the middle of this year, by the end of June. So we're an earlier stage company as opposed to Wayne's production stage company. I'm the executive director and the CEO, and we're set up for an exciting next 6 months.
Bruce, lovely to meet you for the first time, and Wayne, lovely to see you back on this show. We were going to be joined by another company. They've not shown up, so we're going to crack on. So today is a Wyoming special. So we're talking about not just Wyoming, but Wyoming uranium juniors as well. So I think most people know Wyoming from Yellowstone Park and basic cowboy culture, but it's also where 40% of the USA's coal supply comes from. So it's got a history of mining, which kind of is quite useful. We're talking about energy transitions pretty much in the markets at the moment, aren't we, Wayne? So why don't you kick off and tell us why two Aussie companies got attracted to Wyoming? Wayne.
Well, it has to be the environment for mining in Wyoming. We are a premier jurisdiction. I hail from Wyoming now. I've been living here for 25 years. It's by choice. But Wyoming, took the pathway of becoming an agreement state. In a regulatory context, what that means is that the Wyoming people enforce the national rules. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission rules are enforced by the home people. I don't have to go to Washington, D.C. to talk to regulators. We can talk to them in the state capital of Cheyenne. It's so much easier. It's a friendly way to do business. But Wyoming has been attractive for mining companies, but particularly for uranium. Wyoming is an energy capital. You got coal, natural gas, oil, and uranium. We got great class 1 winds for wind farms and pretty decent sunshine most days of the year. So we can produce way more energy in Wyoming than we consume. And the state is really geared towards mining and is very mining friendly.
Absolutely. And Bruce, for you, ISR, that's the thing you guys have got in common as well. ISR, uranium, for you, what drew you to Wyoming, given you're relatively new? I'm sure you had looked at lots of things. Why did you choose it?
Yeah, look, obviously I echo everything that Wayne said. There's, Wyoming is the second largest energy state in the US. And, I think the second least populated place in the US as well. So it is actually a very favourable place and state that understands and has relied on energy production for its wealth, for I'd say up to 100 years almost. And so, we believed that it's the right jurisdiction. Look, we looked at, I've been involved in hard rock projects and other places in the planet. Sometimes the metallurgy is quite hard, depending on how your uranium arrives in the ground. We've got projects in Utah as well, where we've got a big vanadium component. But one of the things that was very attractive is the sandstone-hosted environment and the simplicity of the met, particularly in the parts of the Great Divide where we are located and in the Powder River Basin. So there's no experiments really. It's a well-understood permitting path. The state's comfortable with it. You've of course got to satisfy the requirements, but it's not a mystery. the time frames, touch wood, we haven't gotten through that part of the process that Wayne's so familiar with. But when we get to that point, it's not something we're overly concerned about. Suffice to say that it does take time. So, yeah, look, we compared it as a jurisdiction. We felt that it was a sweet spot.
Okay, and Wayne, let's just talk about that. Okay, you've been through the phases. Your issue hasn't been getting permissions and licenses and, jurisdictional risk, which is what a lot of investors are concerned about at the moment. Wherever you look, whatever the commodity, jurisdictional risk has risen its head and is a big narrative out there for investors because they're concerned they may lose their capital. Your issue has been just the market, the uranium market and uranium price. So what were the kind of long poles in the tent, as it were, for you in terms of the process that you've just been through to get to, production in 2023?
Well, Peninsula put the project into production, the last projects into production in late 2015, early 2016. That really was, when the company emerged from the regulatory process, and it did it very efficiently. I think, in the U.S. context, Peninsula's team back in the mid-2010s did an absolutely exceptional job of efficiently getting a new mine permitted. And the state of Wyoming was friendly towards that. We had that baby born into a rather poor market, and the market conditions did not support ongoing uranium production. So by mid-2019, we decided to idle the project and convert it from one type of chemistry to another. That conversion took some additional regulatory work, and that regulatory work went very smoothly. So today, Peninsula has the permissions to utilize the new process chemistry, and we're waiting for the market conditions to get better. Look, global markets for uranium, I don't think you'll find many people who say they're bad. I think you're going to say it's primed, it's optimal, it's the right time to move into production if you have that capability. And Peninsula pulled that trigger after doing regulatory de-risking of the new process and technical de-risking of the new process. We decided late last year that we would invest our capital now into the restart of the project, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Right, and for you, Bruce, if you look at timing, most success stories are about timing it right, and there's an expectation lots of new entrants would come back as they did the last cycle. What are the investor conversations that you've had, because you will have had some recently in terms of raising capital for this venture of yours to move through these phases? What was the kind of pushback there, and what were the things that kind of got their eyes lit up?
Yeah, look, I absolutely agree. I mean, timing is everything in life, isn't it? And this uranium market especially seems to be one that's been tricky to time. I think there's, our experience has been that there's a general consensus that value has appeared in the marketplace, however you want to describe that. Now, I guess that's a nice way of saying prices are depressed in the junior mining companies. So I think that is a fact in reality, and it's acknowledged by investors that we speak to. They think the time is right to get involved in uranium. I think that's partly because of the cacophony of positive news that's been around in the environment. And look, I point people towards the US situation in particular. Obviously, the largest market for uranium in the world. Roughly, it's just short of 100 gigawatts, and the Department of Energy came out 2 weeks ago and said they want to drive that to 300 gigawatts. They weren't prepared to sit there and let Xi Jinping set the agenda in terms of growing the nuclear power business. So I think, it's also just a general awareness thing. We find that a lot of investors, particularly in the Asian markets, probably haven't thought about uranium for a long time. And it's a good time for them to hear the story again and to hear it in the context of the energy transition. And I think that's making a big difference.
Absolutely, and I kind of do want to get a move into what investors should be looking for with juniors in a second, and what are the variables that they need, which are important. But let's just stick with the kind of jurisdictional component a little bit longer, if we may. The other thing that you guys have got, Colin, apart from uranium and ISR, is the fact you're a North American story, and in the context of IRA and Biden making promises and throwing his checkbook at it, is that homegrown uranium is a rare thing. US consumes way more than it's capable of producing. So where does that put you in terms of the made in the USA, buy local story, Wayne?
Well, no one really knows today what or whether Russian exports are going to survive the current deterioration of the relationship between Russia and the Western world. And that makes the self-sufficiency of the United States nuclear fuel industry a bigger forefront issue. As a rule, the industry has been slow to respond to the news. You don't see big capital investments on uncertainty. When I said no one really knows, that uncertainty is not good enough to spur large capital investments into to an industry that needs both uranium and, well, it's not both, it's all uranium conversion and enrichment investments. And it's good for a company like junior companies generally that we might have a rather small capital investment to put a project back into production because the time is right. You can capitalize on uncertainty, but you're not going to make a huge capital investment. That's why the conversion and enrichment is lagging. But we've got a number of uranium producers who see this as an opportunity today to get themselves back up and running in an environment that's very supportive. So, the U.S. has already sanctioned 3 Rosatom subsidiaries, and Rosatom is deeply entrenched and tied to the war efforts. It looks to me like the deficiency of supply that comes from the Western world is going to have to be met, and it's going to have to be met by Western suppliers. So we think the time is right.
Well, absolutely. And Bruce, obviously you're much earlier stage in terms of, timing, cycles, etc. I guess you're a ways away from that at the moment. But again, coming back to investor conversations, to support what you're doing here. What are they? What's it going to push back when it comes to talking about? When a junior like you talks about energy transition, you're talking the macro, and quite frankly, your ability to contribute to that now is not there. Do those conversations matter now? Do people understand the length of time it takes to, one, build mines, but also deliver against energy transitions? What are those conversations like?
Oh, look, I think that it isn't immediately obvious to people how important nuclear power and uranium miners are in the context of the transition. And there's an education piece. There's a few very well-educated people, obviously, but they're a small number. It is a small sector when you compare it to, even the chocolate bar manufacturers, where the entire market's half the size of Mars Corporation, sort of thing. So, it is small in that context. But what we talk to people about, and what we try to point out, is that with in situ recovery uranium, we're talking about less capital. We're talking about a faster time frame into production, and certainly in an environment like Wyoming, if you've got the right geological and hydrogeotechnical setting, then the permitting frameworks a well-trodden path. It doesn't need to be 10 or 15 years. It's not an Athabasca Basin project that's a kilometre deep. It's 100 metres or maybe slightly more deep. And look, it is very safe, very clean. It's the least environmentally impactful form of mining on the planet. So there's a really good, really strong story. And we think these projects, Wayne's far more experienced in this game than I am by a factor of many, many times. But we aren't talking about 10 years. We're talking more in the region of 4 to 5 years if we get everything right, and maybe even a little sooner if we get some encouragement from the state. And also from a capital point of view, we're looking at, just say £1 million a year plant capacity. We could be in the region 50, 60, $70 million, not $500 million. And it's not a complicated, high pressure, lots of heat, lots of caustic substances floating around. So, it can be part of the cycle, and I think that's what we have to say to people. The Athabasca, those big projects, maybe they will to an extent miss the cycle, but Wayne's only just getting it back into production now, and well done. And I'm not there's no criticism of that, but I'm saying in terms of the cycle, he's got a 10, 15 year runway at it. And we might be 4 or 5 years behind them, but we can still be part of that strengthening in price and part of the cycle. The nuclear power business is going to be massive, and I don't think there's any doubt about that at this point.
What do you say, Wayne? What do you say to that?
Well, I think that companies like Bruce's are doing the right thing. When you think about Wyoming, and this is a little bit about Wyoming, we have been explored in Wyoming, and the land has been explored. Bruce is taking a good business model. You're taking past exploration and you're furthering it. He has databases from prior exploration. The other company which was scheduled to join us is doing a similar thing. They're taking older databases. People who've been poking around Wyoming and looking for uranium have found it. They just didn't have the capital at the time to further their deposits. And then, the uranium markets went into a long and deep recession. Now, those databases are still available. And it's not just Bruce's company and the other company. Peninsula has a database that it's looking at. We're not done expanding our properties. Wyoming is such a fertile place to go looking for uranium projects that there's room for quite a few explorers to put some money into it and to bring projects forward. And when you do come up with a good deposit, you have a reasonable expectation that you can get a permit and that you can open a mine with a modest capital investment. Okay,
and then I'm going to throw a few questions at you. A few from comments that I've seen around social media, and apologies, Wayne, we've discussed this previously, which is around we've mentioned already, Athabasca, high grade, super high grade, therefore everything else, low grade, third tier type stuff. For you, Bruce, when you're looking at picking up these assets, I'm sure you're not doing it because you want to spend your time twiddling your thumbs with a poor asset. What were you looking for? What's important for investors to know about your project or projects in Wyoming? Why will they work?
Yeah, look, and I think I can certainly give you a bit on that. Wayne will have a level of expertise above mine, but look, what we're looking for is mineralization that is sufficiently below the groundwater table and yet sufficiently shallow so that we can drill down to it and then we can develop a bore field at a reasonable cost. So we want good thicknesses of sand, so we and multiple sand units if possible, but we can utilize quite low grades. And so, you're never going to see our companies on the league table of drill holes. It's not going to be melt your face off uranium grades. It simply doesn't work for us, and we're not interested in that stuff. So that's a clear difference. I think, look, when you see the photographs and the pictures of where our projects are, and I'm sure, Wayne's is similar, there's nothing out there except for sagebrush, and there's a sage grouse that floats around a bit, but we're not impinging upon people. Access is generally very easy. There's some seasonality, but we're predominantly on Bureau of Land Management land in the Great Divide, and we've got a minority of landholder positions where we are in the Powder River. That they're not large problems to solve. So I think investors can look at it and say, well, we aren't having to negotiate First Nations arrangements, for instance, on top of the permitting thing. So it is a difficult thing when you're dealing with the superstar, rock star drill intercepts to get investors to really understand that we're not interested in that. We're interested in, real economics and something that we can replicate without taking too many risks.
Well, but Brain, so when can you Freudian slip, Brain, would you mind expanding on that one? Because it is about margin. It's about making money. So how do these low-grade projects make money? Why should they not be called a tier 3 investment? compared to some of the Athabasca guys?
Well, high-grade uranium deposits rely on quick leach kinetics. You need to move the ore. You need to put it through a mill. You need to recover the ore in a couple of hours in the mill. In situ recovery projects are never going to post headline grades. It's just not the nature of the deposit. But what we do have is leachable ore that we can get with slow leach kinetics. In situ recovery is injection of a leach solution into a formation, and you have days, weeks, months of retention time and contact time. So you can get all of the uranium out from underground with a slow leach kinetic in a mild leach solution and do just as well economically as the guys who have to remove ore from the ground, put it through a mill, and catch it in a couple of hours with intense leach kinetics and intense chemical additions. So the difference is a very mild leach process, a leach chemistry that uses low concentrations of chemicals versus an intense leach process which uses high concentrations. So if you want, if you have a high grade ore and you're going to run it through a mill, grade is king. And in situ recovery, grade has never been king. It helps. Good grade helps, but the nature of the deposits are such that they're not necessarily high grade attention getting deposits. They're just easily recovered deposits. That can be done with a patient process in situ recovery.
Right. And so grade is just one of many factors which deliver the economics for a company, or not, in some cases. Bruce, you're again, relatively new story. And I say Wayne and his company are, have been through the phases, as it were, and you say you're not far behind them if you can get moving at pace. So again, for you, what do you think investors need to understand about your business plan? Why does your business plan work? And why is this not just another copycat junior jumping on the bandwagon?
Well, yeah, look, I think the reason we've got a good chance of working is something Wayne touched on before, is we're not greenfields exploring here. We're very much a brownfields exploration play. We started off with Kerr McGee's drilling database from the 70s, and that's some of that's publicly available. We've had some other data that's a bit more proprietary to us. And then in the case of the Powder River, we've acquired, 1,400 odd drill holes, which, is a lot of drilling and would take a long time to execute. So we think that puts us about, 2.5 to 3 years ahead and $15 million ahead of where we're at. So, our market cap's only around $15 or $16 million, and that's the value of the drilling database we just bought. So we think that, that gives us a really good chance of putting a resource out that has some substance. And by that, I mean, it can get us towards that sort of, we think around 8 to 10 million pounds, which doesn't sound a lot in the context of a fission or an X Energy, but it's something that we can address and something we can apply capital to, and as Wayne said, a modest amount of capital, and get into production, reasonably quickly. And we've got a team also in Wyoming. That was one of the other reasons where we got involved with these projects, is we've got a team of people there that give us a good start. I mean, you always have to build more into your team once we've got a resource, but we've certainly got the capability to get to the resource and then the PEA or PFS. And so our ambition is to have that PEA, some stage during next year if all goes well. And that puts us on a path to economics. And, it's not until we could put that on the table that, let's say utilities do start going downstream and wanting to secure pounds in the ground, then at least we can have a conversation and say, look, there are genuinely pounds here, and it's not based on a dodgy inferred resource from the 1960s. It's a modern resource, and it's real, and it's in a location that can be developed 10 miles away from Cameco Smith Hollow Ranch. So, I think that's the difference with us. There aren't too many explorers in Wyoming. There's one or two, but most of them are developers like Wayne who've had assets that have been quite well developed and at the point of production. You've got UR Energy next to us down on the Great Divide, and that John Cass says he's back in production, and I believe him. The weather's probably not helping him out too much at the moment, but So we can see it starting to blossom around us. The business is coming back to life. It's not, we're not going to be the only one doing it. It's going to be, it's going to be all on again in short order. So we think that's why investors can look to us and say, well, look, there is a real possibility here of these assets getting into production.
Okay, and Wayne, just on restarts. You are, along with a couple of other US based companies, talking about restarts over the next sort of 24 months. In your case, this year, mid this year. Spot price, something that people new to the space look at and they go, spot price is really, really important. Most companies seem to be indicating needing 65, 75, $80 just to kind of break even. You guys are cracking on that. You've got contracts in place. You've got inventory. How are you kind of tackling that part of the conversation with your institutional guys and regular shareholders? What do they need to know?
I think a well-constructed sales contract portfolio has exposure to the market within it. You can have contracts that are base priced or fixed priced. Some escalation in there, but you can also have contracts that are market based. Utilities do sign market based. They like to have some market exposure and some fixed price exposure in their portfolios, and suppliers have the same desire. So we expect the spot market will move more favorably in the coming years. Initially, the production from Peninsula is not really destined for the spot market. We're not building a mine and starting a mine based on spot market expectations. That would be foolish. We have good contracts. We're selling into them. Eventually, we'll produce enough to have some available for the spot market. And if the spot market's good, we'll sell it there. Otherwise, we'll hold it for our valuable contracts. So our view is you have to have a well-constructed sales portfolio. It's going to have some exposure to the market, even if you're not selling into the spot market itself. But it's going to, some contracts are going to have prices tied to the spot market movement. We put some floors and ceilings in to protect ourselves and to protect our customers into those types of contracts, so that even in the worst case scenario, we can make some money on those sales. But that's kind of how I view that, Matt. It's the market is going to be what it is. It's supportive and it's moving in the right direction. Now is the time to get up and going, because if you're not producing, you cannot capitalize on the markets. You're just a proxy to the price.
Well, there's a fair few of those in the market. Bruce, I'll just come back to you with regards to how you could have come at this as far as your investors are concerned. So you mentioned earlier, say, like, stocks are heavily discounted at the moment. If you're contrarian, you should be buying. But it's quite clear that uranium equities, despite the strength of the story, are suffering just as much as other commodities at the moment. Again, what would I don't know if you want to make, if there are a couple of points that you'd make to people looking in at uranium space, why is this a better bet than, say, some of the other equities out there? Or maybe you don't think it is?
Oh, no, look, I absolutely do think it is. I think the fundamentals are so powerful in the case of uranium, and I don't think there's another commodity that has such a long drought and such a tough time, particularly in the US context. And so there's some really big things that have changed. From the days when the Berlin Wall came down and everyone started to become friendly with the Russians, back to where we are now, that is a seismic shift in sentiment and in reality. If you're a utility in the US, you've gone from thinking, oh, my business model for nuclear is bad, and I'm going to be shutting down my reactors, to, oh, look, the Inflation Reduction Act is now giving me, in, say, Diablo Canyon, for instance, which, we were all convinced would be shut down. And it was incredible that Gavin Newsom turned around and said, no, we're not going to shut it down. And in fact, we're going to extend its life by at least 20 years. So the buyer at that plant now is looking forward and going, I need to buy uranium. And guess what? I don't think I'm buying it from Kazakhstan anymore. So where am I going to get it from? And they've got the production on their back doorstep. if not now, certainly within the period that they would be looking to contract. But they've got to make a commitment to the local miners and converters and enrichers. So, we think that is the fundamental driving force, and that's not going to go away. I mean, even if the conflict in Ukraine stopped today, I don't think anyone's going to forget this in a hurry, and they won't be rushing back into the arms of Rosatom to get their supply. So I think that is it, and that's the driver. And to be fair, we saw that back in 2018, but we saw the change in sentiment in nuclear, but we didn't see, what's happened with Ukraine and Russia. So we thought it was a good idea without all of that. And you put that on top, and it's just turbocharged the fundamentals. So look, the timing is the thing, though. Small companies like ours, you've got to expect that it's going to be tough for an extended period of time. And so one of the things that's great about our proposition is we can make some real progress without doing too much drilling. And that's, discovery cost is everything in our game, and longevity is the other thing. And so we've got a plan to get ourselves through for an extended period. It won't last forever, but if I have to take a half salary or stop taking a salary, well, those will be the sacrifices we have to make one day if it gets that bad. But we can deliver real value without spending too much more money at this point, and try and time ourselves for the next improvement.
Yeah, Matt, if I can just add to that, Bruce's business model is very clever. It's what he said: the cost of discovery, or the price of discovery, using other people's data is significantly lower than the price of discovery going out and drilling fresh ground and you may be in the neighborhood, but you don't know what you're going to find. You have other people's data. There's sunk costs there, and you can develop the cost of acquisition of a new project can be significantly lower than going out and buying somebody else's project. You can develop deposits using other people's data, quite a bit less expensive in a cost per pound basis than any other way. And that's a model that like I kind of indicated, Peninsula has taken that up. We have databases, and we spent some time with them, and we're looking at other project areas in the state of Wyoming that could complement the Lance projects as well.
It's interesting times indeed, and I'm sure we could rumble on a lot longer on the macro with regards to not just Gavin Newsom, but lots of politicians now having the permission to actually talk about a nuclear as a solution for baseload energy, because they're not going to get much pushback. I think the Greens have, seem to have sort of stood back and taken that on board. Even Greta is on board. Well, look, chaps, Bruce, lovely to meet you for the first time. I'd love for you to come on with your company and get into the weeds with us a little bit more. And Wayne Heili, CEO, MD at Peninsula Energy, close to production, and appreciate you sharing your insight, not just on the Wyoming ISR, but also US macro situation today. I think for the newbies to mining and the newbies to uranium investing, this has been an extremely educational session. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Great. Thanks, Matt.